Yeah, I think first things first is I don't particularly enjoy combat too much. So we implemented several rules to try to help speed up combat. Before, when we were playing strictly by the rules of the game, combat can go 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and we only really have a 3-hour session. Today, we entered combat around 9:50. We ended combat around 11:10. Plus, we had the break, so we're still hitting about an hour and a half worth of combat. And if I had my personal take, I'd like to try to make it pretty strongly an hour, unless it's a boss fight or something like that. But we implemented a couple rules. I think the biggest one, which everyone will notice, is we introduced something I took from 4th edition, which is static defenses. The concept is that instead of you rolling an attack roll against them, or instead of them rolling a save against your spell, you are rolling an attack roll against their specific defense. This way, hypothetically, our players and I should have my attack roll immediately there, instead of us trying to scramble finding the bonuses. Particularly for me, since I use multiple enemies during combat to try to keep it interesting. If I'm rolling a dex save for 3 different people with 3 different stats, that bogs down time as I try to go through the character sheets. So yeah, we have static defenses as one of our rules. So I guess, do you guys like that rule? I thought it sped up combat quite a bit for at least our spellcasting part.
Being someone who is playing spellcasters all the time right now, I actually have to agree. I do think that it has sped up combat quite a bit. It's quite nice.
I kind of like it because I have a lot of I have a high wisdom and a high spell attack, so it really benefits me. Because it's a lot easier to hit a defense than try not to get them to save.
Actually, I mapped it out, and I think Danny Allinson, I kept messaging Danny Allinson for like 2 hours trying to figure out the math for this. Technically, the chances of you hitting their defense should be the same as if they were rolling the save, theoretically. And we did the math, and we found out the formula to do it. So, hypothetically, it's the same. Though that being said, you hit the wisdom defense a lot because monsters don't tend to have high wisdom, and you have a really high spell attack, like ridiculously high.
So we do have a question in the chat asking, how do static defenses work? Is that a 5e thing, or is it from a previous edition? It's kind of an amalgamation of all of those things. It is originally, it's kind of based off a 4th edition idea, but it is set to work well in 5th edition. Basically how it works is you take whatever your normal saving throw bonus would be, plus a static number that we've determined. I think it's 13, right?
14.
So we take 14 plus your saving throw bonus, and that's basically your static defense, or like your armor class for that specific stat.
Yep, so I like it because dexterous characters are going to have a 22 or 23 static dex defense. I'm assuming Lilith and Phillip have a pretty high wisdom defense.
And charisma, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, but that is it makes sense based on their character. They naturally would be very willful, and that number represents it quite nicely. And I like the feeling of an opponent rolling against this defense, because it does, if a player rolls low on a saving throw, it makes it sound like it's the player's fault for rolling low. In this case, if the enemy throws there, it's just their magic overpowering a really high number as opposed to a player rolling really low. So it allows us to think a little higher as far as numbers are concerned, which I think makes it a little more exciting.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Go ahead, Danny.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, just to tack on to what Chris said, I think one other thing we can put into this is, because they are rolling against our defenses, having our defenses be static is a good way to represent the character's disposition. And like Chris said, it's just them rolling to try and overpower that. So with us rolling a saving throw, it's like it fluctuates, and sometimes they're good, and sometimes they have a terrible disposition as far as like con saves or wisdom saves. But the static defenses kind of reflects our characters more accurately.
And especially when you get used to the system, it does save time, and which is very important for us trying to keep things interesting for more than just us.
And that being said, I don't think anyone really cares for extended combats. I mean, if I gave those enemies full hit points or something like that, as we've done in the past, that combat would have went around about 2 more rounds, and then by that time it will be I reload and I shoot, or I cast fireball again, or something to that.
It would start to get repetitive.
Yeah, and we don't want that. This combat went about 3.5 rounds, and that's a lot better than going 6 or 7.
Sure. Another thing, Chris, what's another example you can think of how we've managed to juggle combat a little bit to keep it more interesting, other than these static defenses?
Repeat the question, sorry?
What's another way in which we've changed combat from its base form to make it maybe work a little bit faster, be less repetitive, just more interesting in general?
I have a car alarm going off, and it's driving me nuts. Yeah, so for combat, we do have a lot of base combat rules, and that aren't very different. I mean, we still have sorcerer meta magics. We still have, smiting going on when we have our paladin, that sort of thing. So a lot of what happened was I gave a lot of the players a little something extra to help speed things up. Like, Zarrius now can attack 3 times per turn on his standard action as opposed to 2, which is in turn going to speed up combat. There's a whole DM's formula I do for deciding HP and that sort of thing. I don't know if you want me to get into that.
No, we don't have to get into specifics.
Okay. So I do tend to lower HP of monsters, so they hit hard and they die faster. In some cases, in this case, those tiger creatures, they died pretty quick. They hit for quite a bit of damage, but the gorilla, he didn't have any more HP, but he also did a little less damage per se. So, and it's a lot on the monster choice as well. I wouldn't throw like 4 tanky characters against the party, because we'd be there for 2 hours just trying to hit the 24, 25 AC or whatever nonsense that is.
Cool. So obviously we've done a lot of stuff to try to juggle combat a little bit more, but let's transition a little bit away from combat specifically and talk a little bit more about characters. Chris, as a DM, you of course have this crazy cast of characters that you have to deal with. I'm going to transition over to our title screen really quick. Yeah, so we have this like slew of interesting people that you as a DM have to juggle stories between. So go a little bit into what you do as a DM to make sure that every character has their time in the spotlight, we'll say.
Yeah, so I do think in the meta narrative. In this new continent, there are 3 major cultures. There's 4 cultures if we count the mountain range nonsense. And so when I go into a chapter, I go, which character is going to be featured this turn? In this case, Bryn is kind of taking a back seat. She has her moments, but they're not anything that I write. It's something that I am trusting Danny Allinson to do as a player.
Hey.
But in this case, I really planned this chapter around Zarrius. Is Zarrius going to be able to lead the party in Astor's absence? So in this moment, we're seeing, I think we're seeing strides with Zarrius, how he's interacting with the other players, how he's taking the front in a lot of the talking. And, how he's doing simple things like asking for help from the party, which I think is huge character-wise for him. But in the next chapter, as we go into a different culture, we will see someone else take the front row, and Zarrius may take a sideline, and we sort of rotate. So by the end of this story arc, we'll see, you know, multiple characters get multiple scenes, multiple growth, and hopefully in turn show a better character, a stronger character as we go into bigger conflicts.
Sounds great. And on the other side, I'm going to ask some of our players really quick how they approach kind of this communal storytelling within this game called Dungeons and Dragons. So we'll go ahead and start with John. John has played Narroth since the beginning of this campaign, actually. Almost 2.5 years you've played the same character. How do you juggle keeping the character growing in a way that would remain interesting for not only other players here, as you've done, but now for people that may be listening in?
Yeah, so Narroth is definitely a character that has been growing from the very beginning. At the beginning, well, at part 2 of our adventure, Narroth and the party actually went together to take down and ultimately kill Narroth's father. And so that story arc especially was mostly around Narroth. Since then, other characters have taken the forefront, but because of the dynamic settings around him, it's really easy for Narroth to kind of interact with each of those settings and find something that pulls him in. For instance, in Narroth's backstory, he was the leader of the Thieves Guild in Tyria. Now, that has had him basically going from the beginning saying, how can I basically improve my home from what I'm getting from these adventures? So he's trying to actually create a better Thieves Guild. And his dream is actually to unite the Thieves Guild throughout. In Zhangjiao, he learned a little bit more about balance, trying to combine not only the dragon fire that he's used to and is best at, but also trying to incorporate different sides of his own character, which in turn bring in different sides of the magic that he wields. So just taking a little bit from the different environments that we're in. I'm not sure what Narroth is going to take from this place, but I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes.
Thanks. Danny, I want you to kind of follow up with that as the only other player who is playing the same character from the very beginning of the campaign. Astor, we've seen a lot of changes throughout before the live show began. Started as kind of a mentee to another PC and has grown into his own throughout this campaign. So why don't you go a little bit into how you manage to grow the character in different roles within the party?
Sure. So the fun part about Astor is he started as a character who was a blank slate. He was someone who grew up as part of a troupe, kind of just played the lute, did some acrobatics, and what happens is
a circus troupe, not a military troupe.
Sorry,
Troupe with an E.
Circus troupe, yes. And so once he got old enough, he kind of just started traveling around, and due to a series of unfortunate events, I suppose, he kind of got thrown into this huge, like a resistance, and things kind of just escalated very quickly at that point. So I had to approach it as someone who never really had a hard life is suddenly having all of these obstacles being thrown at him. Like he has to fight for his life, he has to kind of at some point also consider his comrades, and it's just interesting because he has all of these things happen to him. So I am always thinking about how does Astor react to this based on his personal beliefs, what he's experienced. So he's having so many things happen to him that have never happened before. So his reactions are always going to be on the spot in the moment. So it's going to be just as interesting for everybody else as it is for me. So because of that, I think that's that would be the main reason why I'm able to keep him interesting, fresh, and he's someone who's kind of carving his own thing into history, even if it's unknowingly and unwillingly, I would say. So I'm kind of looking forward to see how that develops as this campaign goes on some more.
Awesome. I think our players here may be noticing a pattern. I'm going over to Alan next. Alan, as somebody who originally started this campaign in a much different role in combat, with your original character, you were a ranged DPS. Now with Lilith as the main healer of the party, how do you switch up the roles and your thought process of how you react within combat specifically to this change in character that you went through?
Well, originally, I played a character that I'm, a little bit more comfortable with. I've played Dungeons and Dragons for a very long time. And I sort of play that role where I'm the, either the up in your face sort of bash 'em type character to, or stay back and kill you from afar type of character. That's what I'm comfortable with. That's, how I've always played. Now playing a healer, I have to remind myself, not to try to sort of keep people alive and, not worry about, okay, I know this guy is on the edge, I can kill him, or I can keep my party member alive, by casting that healing spell. I have to know that, my role is different now. And I'm more of a support character in combat than, I have been before. As far as, playing Lilith, she's completely different than my original character. My original character was an assassin. That's what she did. She killed people. Lilith is totally the opposite. She's, she's a healer. She's, keeps people alive. She wants to save people. And I just got to remember to keep that mindset that, I'm no longer a killer. I'm a healer.
Awesome. Last but not least, we have Zarrius. Zarrius is Seitz. It's your first character in this campaign. He did come in a little bit later than Narroth and Astor, but has gone through a tremendous growth in his own throughout this story. Kind of go into a little bit for me how you've changed a little bit, I guess. I know we touched on it a little bit last week, but how you've seen your own growth as a player reflected in Zarrius's own growth.
Yeah, so what I was used to playing, which I think I stated last week, was that I was used to playing a wheeling, dealing, slashing, bashing barbarian that would just run into fights and just smash everything. And usually they were more of the chaotic or neutral side of things, so I was just totally fine with killing people, whatnot. This character, Zarrius, for me, has forced me... I am a lawful good character, so I do not like to do bad things whatsoever. It has gone completely against what I've always done and have thought of doing in terms of, okay, this is just I kill everyone sort of thing. But with this character, with Zarrius, I am forced to think more about what I'm doing as a player playing a character. I have to think more about, okay, how is this action going to affect me? How is this going to affect my party? What can I do to tell the party that I do not like what is going on and this is not what it should be happening. That has kind of forced me to... It has made me improve as a player, but it's also, I feel like, changed. Zarrius has changed with my thought process more and more as I've played him, to recognize those things and how they're going to affect everyone in the party.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll just skip right over Bryn. We don't need to talk about her unless anybody has any specific questions.
Why?
Why what?
I do have a question for Bryn.
Okay.
So you went from playing brooding characters, both your first character, which was a mentor, to Astor, who is kind of this old fart who wouldn't take crap from anyone, to Kai, who ended up being a villain. How do you go from that to playing a relatively lighthearted character?
I mean, even when we were playing, when I was playing both Ryan and Kai, there would be little quips and stuff that would add, little sarcastic comments that I would add in every once in a while, just to kind of keep the mood a little bit light. I think when I originally thought of Bryn as a character for this campaign, I knew what was coming because, as you said, Kai was kind of the villain of the last arc. So I knew that it was going to be a little bit darker at the end of that, and I wanted to make a character that would balance that out a little bit more. I knew that the remaining PCs would be a little bit brooding, a little bit sad about what had happened, and so I wanted to inject some lightheartedness in there just to kind of keep spirits up as we moved forward onto the next chapter that was coming up. So there's still a lot that Bryn has to offer. A lot, you know, you've only scratched the surface at this point with these 3 episodes, so everybody will see a little bit more of Bryn as you continue to travel with her. You'll learn things here and there about how she really is.
Cool.
There from previous weeks, if you get some weeks behind. So we'd be happy to see you back again, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. Bye.